Winterfell was cold, that early spring morning, but the chill outside could not match the cold, not in Ned Stark's chest. King Robert had come south with Ned to hear Stannis' claim, but whispers in the hall spoke of Robert's favour for Joffrey. Ned stood beside Stannis in the great hall, feeling each breath as he stepped forward. "My lords and ladies," Ned began, voice steady though his heart raced, "I bear witness that Stannis Baratheon is the rightful king of the 7 kingdoms." The words echoed. The courtiers shifted, astonished. Cersei's eyes narrowed like edged blades. Littlefinger looked surprised. Varys merely tilted his head. Despite his loyalty to Robert, Ned could not ignore the truth. He'd discovered in Robert's letters that Stannis was the elder brother of Renly by a matter of minutes. The birth records in Storm's End chronicled Itrobert's claim, overshadowed by circumstance, not law. Ned saw the realm's justice was at stake. Stannis stood stiffly. Beside him, black hair like oil, the Baratheon stag glowing behind. His eyes met Ned's for a moment's silent gratitude. But outside, rumblings began. Cersei rose, looking pale and angry. "Sir Roderick, Lord Stark, are you saying you betray your king for his older brother?" She trembled with fury. Ned glanced. At Robert, the king's broad smile faded, his blue eyes sharp as ice. Yet Ned held firm. "I serve the realm above any man. The law names Stannis. My conscience demands truth." Gasps filled the hall. Some bowed heads, others stared in disbelief. Robert stood, heavy footsteps thudding. "Stannis Baratheon, my oldest brother?" he asked quietly. Stannis inclined his head, proud. Robert stared at him, then looked at Ned. "Why?" "The catalyst question," Ned replied. "Because the realm must not be ruled by lies. For peace, for justice." Silence weighed the hall. That night, in Ned's solar, Catelyn gently closed the door behind them. She looked at him, worry etched across her face. "You've thrown us into the storm." She sat by the fire. "Robert will not take this lightly." His own wife feared for their lives and the lives of their children. "I know," Ned whispered, "but the realm deserves the truth before more blood is spilled. If we wait until after Robert dies, the realm tears itself apart between you." He frowned. Catelyn touched his hand. "What Stannis gains others may resent. The Lannisters will fight to keep their power." Ned nodded. "True. But we must stand first. Show we meant justice, not ambition." Meanwhile, in King's Landing's corridors, the news spread like wildfire. Varys confirmed rumors to Stannis. "Lord Eddard Stark backs you." Stannis' face remained grave. He had no practice in gratitude, but he offered a curt nod. The small folk began to murmur of honor, loyalty, and hope. In the Riverlands, word reached distant lords. Some questioned, others felt relief. The Starks brought prestige. Houses loyal to the north began sending envoys to Storm's End. The wheels of war began turning. That very night, across Blackwater Bay, little ships made for Dragonstone. Stannis Bannerman prepared. With Ned's support, they felt stronger. And in Winterfell, Ned penned a letter to his daughters, warning them to stay hidden should the war reach the north. Safety first, always, but not everyone approved. In Fleabottom, a young Sellsword overheard rumors. Stannis, the king now, a dog-faced usurper, he spat in disdain. The Lannister Watch sets traps. The Iron Throne's web of spies began to shift focus from Ned to Stannis. Dangerous days ahead. South of King's Landing, on Dragonstone, Melisandre watched, flames dancing in her eyes. She whispered prophecy. The true king stands backed by the Lord of Winterfell. The red star burns bright. She saw power and war in those flames. The fire priests moved closer to Stannis' side. Back in Winterfell, Ned stood under the godswood. A lone weirwood tree bore witness. He whispered words to the old gods, his vow to truth echoing through the silent wood. Above, ravens stirred. The Stark's fate and Stannis' fate were now entwined, forever changed. The sun rose behind the red, keep like blood smeared across the sky. Inside the castle, Queen Cersei was pacing, her fingers clutching a goblet of wine she hadn't touched. Sir Jaime stood at the door, watching his sister with concern. "He's turned traitor," she hissed. "Lord Eddard Stark has betrayed the crown by backing Stannis." Jaime smirked, leaning against the wall. "And yet it's not treason, if he's supporting the rightful heir. Stannis is Robert's brother, older than Renly." Cersei turned on him, eyes burning. "Do you want your children exposed? Do you want them dead?" Jaime's face darkened. Of course not. The incest secret hung between them like a noose. Meanwhile, in the Tower of the Hand, Ned read a raven scroll from Maester Luwin in Wit. Robb had begun training the bannermen. Ned felt torn. His son was only a boy, yet the drums of war were already beating. He folded the letter and turned to Lord Renly, who stood by the window. "You're making a mistake," Renly said coldly. "Stannis has no love, no support. The people love me more." Ned eyed him carefully. "The people may love you, but the law favors Stannis, and love cannot hold the realm together." Renly scoffed and stormed out, insulted Ned's support. For Stannis had triggered more than royal fury. It split the court into pieces. The small council was in disarray. Littlefinger watched, amused, hiding his own calculations. "Lord Stark plays the game too honestly," he murmured to Varys, "but that honesty may cost him everything." Varys simply nodded. "He has started." A fire in a hall soaked with oil, and the flames will not be gentle. The Spider was already considering which side to favor, Stannis or Lannister. Survival was the only loyalty he ever kept across the narrow sea. Word reached even Illyrio Mopotis and a silver-haired girl with violet eyes. Daenerys Targaryen heard of the Northern Lord who defied the Queen and chose the rightful heir. She smiled faintly. "Maybe Westeros still has men of honor," she said. Viserys laughed bitterly. "Honor won't help us if Stannis wins first." Back in King's Landing, tensions broke. Cersei ordered the City Watch to protect the throne, which in truth meant purging any who whispered Stannis' name. The gold cloaks dragged suspected traitors from beds, from marketplaces. Ned was warned by a loyal scribe. "They're watching you now, my lord. Your house is not safe." Ned sent word to Howland Reed and the other northern bannermen, "Prepare for war." He knew what was coming. He visited Robert one last time, finding the king drunk, slumped in his chair. "You once told me truth matters more than friendship," Ned said softly. Robert looked up, his face haggard. "Aye, but I never thought you'd be the one to tear us apart with it." Ned didn't reply. He bowed his head and walked away. By dusk, Stannis' banner had been raised at Dragonstone, a black stag on a field of red flames. Davos Seaworth stood beside his king, watching ships being loaded. "You have Stark's support, my lord, but you will not have peace." Stannis nodded. "I do not need peace. I need justice." And so, the preparations began. Ships readied, troops trained, spies uncovered. the Lannisters started hiring mercenaries. Tywin Lannister received the news in Casterly Rock with a slow, seething rage. Stark has broken the game. It's war, then. Let us show the North what it means to cross lions. Sansa, still in King's Landing, grew more afraid by the day. She wrote secret letters to her family, slipping them into bread loaves baked for delivery to the kitchens. Arya vanished often, learning to move unseen. Syrio Forel trained her harder than ever. The wolf must learn to fight like the cat. Swift, quiet, dangerous. And in Winterfell, Bran watched the ravens fly south. He felt something was changing deeply, permanently. The old gods whispered to him in dreams of flames, shadows, and a broken crown. The war had not started yet, but everyone felt it like thunder before the storm. The day the raven arrived at Dragonstone, bearing Lord Stark's seal, Stannis Baratheon ordered the castle's bells to be rung. Not for celebration, but for readiness. War had come, and he would not be caught unprepared. So, the North stands. With me, he said to Davos, eyes narrow, voice like cold steel. Then we strike before the lions sharpen their claws. Across the narrow sea, spies watched Stannis' preparations and sent word back to King's Landing. Cersei's council met in tense silence. Littlefinger stood with arms crossed. Stannis moves fast. Stark gives him power he never had. Cersei slammed her goblet against the table. Then we bleed the North. If Stark wants to play kingmaker, we will crush his house first. At her order, ravens were sent to the Freys, the Boltons, even to the Greyjoys. Promises were made, titles, gold, land. Cersei was building alliances, not with loyalty, but desperation and blood-soaked bribes. Tywin prepared to march east from Casterly Rock. Jaime Lannister, dressed in golden armor, smirked as he led the first Lannister column toward the Riverlands. Let's remind the Starks who really rules. Back in Winterfell, Robb Stark stood at the head of the Great Hall. He was young, but taller now, harder. We ride for the neck, he said. If the Lannisters cross into the Riverlands, we'll cut them down before they reach Riverrun. The banners were called the Manderleys, the Umbers, the Carstarks. The North was moving, but not all lords were loyal. In Dreadfort, Roose Bolton read Cersei's offer in silence. Power, autonomy, perhaps even Warden of the North if the Starks fell. He folded the letter and burned it, but his thoughts stayed dark. The Starks will bleed, he whispered to no one. Meanwhile, at the wall, Jon Snow felt restless. Ghost paced outside his chamber, growling at the wind. Maester Aemon noticed. The signs. When the North burns, the wall will feel the heat, the old man said. Jon nodded. And if Stannis marches for the throne, will he still care for the Night's Watch? At King's Landing, the court turned cold and paranoid. Sansa was no longer treated as a guest, but a bargaining chip. Cersei watched her closely, smiling. With venom. If your father wants war, then perhaps I'll send him your head in a box. Sansa cried quietly at night, but she no longer dreamed of golden princes. She dreamt of escape, of Winterfell, of snow-covered safety. Arya, on the other hand, had vanished from the keep. Disguised as a kitchen boy, she slipped through the sewers at night, learning faces, listening to whispers. She heard about the city. Watch being paid double by the Lannisters. About Varys birds warning of fire priests arriving in Westeros. And about a boy named Gendry, taken away quietly by gold cloaks. Ned Stark, aware of the danger pressing in, made a bold decision. He met secretly with Seer Barristan Selmy. You served the realm, not kings. What would you say if I told you Joffrey is not Robert's true-born son? Ser Barristan looked long at Ned, then spoke carefully. I would say I always suspected, but proving it now could cost thousands of lives. Ned nodded, and hiding it already has. The Iron Throne itself became a powder keg. Robert, growing sicker and more unstable, called for a final hunt, one last escape before decisions were made. But whispers said the Lannisters were preparing for his death. Poison, accidents, anything to put Joffrey on the throne before Stannis arrived. In Dragonstone, Melisandre prepared her rituals. The flames say the stag will rise with the wolf beside him, but the lion waits in the dark with teeth bared. Stannis ignored the mysticism, focused only on his next step, sailing to Storm's End, claiming it, then marching to King's Landing before the Lannisters could solidify their grip. And so the game moved faster. Lines were drawn in blood. The old alliances crumbled. The realm didn't just face civil war, it faced a reckoning. Ned Stark had started something that could not be undone. He had chosen truth over comfort, law over politics, and soon everyone would pay the price. Robert Baratheon was dying. His wounds from the boar hunt were deeper than anyone realized, perhaps more sinister. Some whispered poison was involved. Others blamed wine and foolish pride. But as he lay feverish in bed, Cersei kept all the maesters away and allowed only select guards to enter. Ned Stark, however, forced his way in. The stench of death hung. In the royal chamber, Robert's face was pale, breath ragged. Ned knelt beside him, gripping the king's heavy hand. "You must name your successor," he said. "Do it before you fall." Robert, half delirious, mumbled something about his children. Ned leaned in. "They are not yours, Robert. You know this." A long silence. Then, with pain creasing his brow, Robert whispered, "Then let it be, ... Stannis. He's cold, but he's honest." Ned immediately summoned a scribe. The decree was written, signed with Robert's seal, and placed in his hand. But Cersei was watching. That night, as Ned slept, the decree vanished. By morning, Robert was dead. Bells rang across the city, the streets fell quiet, and in the throne room Joffrey sat on the Iron Throne, smirking, golden-haired and cruel. Cersei declared him king. "The will of the king is clear," she said, voice loud, hands tight on the boy's shoulder. Ned stood tall beside Ser Barristan. "That boy is no king. He is no son of Robert Baratheon." Murmurs rippled through the court. The guards looked uncertain. Then Cersei snapped her fingers. The gold cloaks surrounded Ned. He had trusted Littlefinger to control them, but Baelish only shrugged. "I did warn you, Lord Stark," he said with a sly smile. Steel rang in the hall. Ned reached for his sword, but Ser Barristan blocked the blow aimed for him. Chaos exploded in the chamber. Blades clashed. Blood spilled on the marble floor. Joffrey screamed. Cersei pulled him away. But, in the confusion, Ned and Barristan escaped, wounded but alive. They fled through secret tunnels, helped by Varys and a few loyal guards. In the darkness, Varys whispered, "You've started a war, Lord Stark. Now finish it." Outside the city, ravens flew to Winterfell. Robb marched harder. At River Run, the Tullys joined them. The Riverlands turned their banners toward the north. Lord Hoster, old and ill, sent out the Blackfish. "Ride with the boy. Make sure he survives." Stannis, learning of Robert's death and Ned's escape, accelerated his plans. He sailed from Dragonstone, landing at Storm's End with full force. The Baratheon banners flew again, but this time for war. Melisandre declared it a sign from R'hllor, the usurper child sits falsely on the throne. Light will cleanse the lie. Renly fled King's Landing. He headed south to Highgarden, hoping to gain the Tyrells. Stannis cannot win the realm. He wins battles, not hearts. But the realm was too torn to listen. It had already begun choosing sides. Lannisters or Stannis, wolves or lions, and in the shadows, something darker stirred. North of the wall, wildlings moved in larger numbers. Jon Snow saw their fires at night. Ghosts growled at things Jon couldn't see. Maester Aemon warned, when men fight for crowns, they forget what creeps in the dark. Back in the capital, Cersei sent out new orders. Kill every raven that leaves the castle, she hissed, and find Ned Stark. I want his head. But Ned was no longer alone. He was hiding in the Riverlands, protected by bannermen loyal to the North, and as the realm crumbled into civil war, he wrote his final letters. The Iron Throne is false. The boy king is born of incest. The true king is Stannis Baratheon, and across the land men read those letters. Some burned them, others sharpened swords. The war had truly begun. Smoke rose over the Riverlands. The Lannister armies had begun their march, burning villages loyal to the Starks, ravaging the lands around Harrenhal and Riverrun. Tywin Lannister, cold and ruthless, wanted to send a message. Let the wolf remember what it costs to howl, he told his bannermen. But Robb Stark was no longer a boy. He struck back with precision, ambushing supply lines, capturing Lannister scouts. His bannermen called him the Young Wolf, and even the Riverlords began to believe he could win. Catelyn rode with him, a mother with grief carved into her face and fury in her voice. We fight not just for Ned, she told the lords. We fight for justice. Farther south, Stannis made his move. Backed by Melisandre's red priests and the strength of Storm's End, he led a disciplined march toward King's Landing. His army was smaller but deadly. Melisandre whispered dark prayers in the night, and strange shadows followed their march. Men who mocked the Red Woman often died in their sleep. Ned, still in hiding near Riverrun, received news from Varys Robert's decree had been recovered. A secret copy kept by Grand Maester Pycelle out of fear, with the king's signed seal. Naming Stannis heir, the game shifted. Ned sent copies to every major house. Roberts will name Stannis. Joffrey is a fraud. The throne is stolen by incest. The realm trembled under the weight of those words. In the Vale, young Lord Robert, Aaron's advisors debated their stance. Littlefinger, now cornered by his earlier betrayal of Ned, worked to sway Lady Lysa. The North will bleed, and the Lannisters will pay, he said with his usual charm. But even Lysa felt unease. Her dead sister's warnings still echoed Renly. Meanwhile, had formed a court of beauty and charm in Highgarden. The Tyrells supported him reluctantly, drawn more to Margaery's ambitions than Renly's claim. He smiles well, Olenna, Tyrell said, but there's no steel behind his eyes. As Stannis approached the capital, chaos reigned inside King's Landing. Food grew scarce, riots broke out, the gold cloaks were stretched thin. Joffrey tried to rule with cruelty, executing men in the streets, flaying supposed traitors. But the people didn't cheer, they cursed. Cersei clung to power, growing more unstable by the day. Burn the letters, she screamed at Pycelle. Silence the whispers. Let the traitors Stark rot in the dirt. But the more she tried to suppress the truth, the more it spread. Songs were sung in taverns of the true king in fire, of the wolf lord's honor, of the lion's lie, and the wildfire stockpiles under the Red Keep grew larger. Under Cersei's private command, at Castle Black, Jon Snow watched the skies turn dark. Word of the war had reached the wall, but there was something more troubling in the cold winds. Dead men walked again in the woods, and ravens refused to return. While the realm tears itself apart, Lord Commander Mormont said grimly, the real war creeps south. Meanwhile, Arya had escaped the city entirely, disguised as a boy and traveling with a band of refugees. She heard rumors on the road of her father's survival, of her brother's war, of dragons being born across the sea. Hatred grew in her heart. She sharpened a stick every night, whispering names, Cersei, Joffrey, the Mountain. The hound Sansa, still trapped in the Red Keep, was forced to kneel beside Joffrey daily. He threatened her, humiliated her, made her repeat lies, but Sansa had changed. She no longer dreamed of rescue. She studied her captors. She listened. She survived, and across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen stood beneath a red sky, cradling 3 dragons. Her ships would be ready soon, and Westeros, it was eating itself alive. When fire and blood sweep through the land, she whispered, I will come home. Ned Stark had wanted truth to bring peace, but it brought fire. The realm bled, the banners were flying, and the Iron Throne trembled under the weight of so many lies and claims. The final reckoning was near. The war reached King's Landing like a thunderclap. Stannis Baratheon's fleet appeared on the horizon, black sails blotting out the sea. His soldiers marched under the fiery stag, and at their front stood Seer Davos Seaworth, leading the vanguard. Melisandre stood atop the main deck, whispering chants to the flames, eyes glowing with prophecy. Inside the Red Keep, panic ruled. Had ordered the city gates sealed and stockpiles of wildfire placed in every corner. If we fall, let the city burn with us, she told Pycelle. Her voice cracked from wine and madness. But this time, Ned Stark had not waited. With the help of Varys, said Barristan and northern loyalists, he and a force of Riverland and northern troops had circled through secret paths and breached the city walls a night before the siege. His first objective, the Tower of the Hand His Daughters. Sansa was rescued by Barristan Selmy, bloodied but alive. Arya found Ned herself in the chaos, leaping into his arms like a shadow out of the mist. The reunion was short-lived there. Was still a war to win. As Stannis laid siege from the front, Ned's forces opened the gates from within. The Gold Cloaks, split between fear and fatigue, either surrendered or turned on their commanders. Stannis stormed into the Red Keep while wildfire exploded in distant alleys, lighting the night sky green. Joffrey tried to flee. He screamed at his guards, demanded loyalty, offered coin and titles, but no one followed. He was dragged from the throne room, kicking and crying, still shouting, I am the king. Cersei sat in the throne room with Tommen in her arms, a vial of poison clutched in her fingers. But Stannis entered with Melisandre before she could drink. He offered no mercy. The false queen, he said, eyes blazing. The fires see your sins. Cersei was arrested. Joffrey was executed in the courtyard publicly, brutally. The people cheered not for Stannis, but for justice. And in the crowd, Arya watched it all with quiet satisfaction. With King's Landing taken, the war shifted. The Lannister armies, now leaderless, fractured. Tywin was ambushed by Robb's forces in the Riverlands and killed. Jaime, captured by Robb, was sent as a bargaining tool to the north. The war was not over, but the board had shifted completely. Was crowned king in the Great Sept. Ned stood beside him not as hand this time, but as warden of the north once more. You did what others feared, Stannis told him. You stood for the law, not for gain. But the realm was not healed. The Tyrells turned their eyes toward dawn, preparing for their own power plays. The Iron Islands, sensing weakness, declared independence again. And far to the east, Daenerys sailed westward with her dragons. She had seen the flames to dot. In Winterfell, Robb returned, a victor. But he was no longer the cheerful boy who rode south. He was quiet now, focused. He saw what war did to men, and he saw the cost of honor. Jon Snow remained at the wall. He had begged to be released from his vows, but Maester Aemon refused. The realm needs a Stark here more than ever, the old man said. The dead do not care who sits the Iron Throne. And in the dungeons of King's Landing, Cersei waited, her hair shorn, her pride shattered, but her hate burned brighter than ever. Stannis may wear the crown, she whispered, but winter is coming for us all. Ned Stark had won. He had saved his daughters. He had restored order to the throne. But he had also changed Westeros forever. Truth had triumphed. But the realm would never be the same, because once you break the Game of Thrones, the pieces never fit quite the same again.